Hi, my name is Joseph, and I want to discuss Firefly, a TV series created by Josh Whedon that ran from September 20th, 2002 until August 4th, 2003. So it only lasted for 1 year, and it was only for one season, and that's an unfortunate thing. Well, both an unfortunate and a fortunate thing, which I'll get into later. So, in case you guys are worried about spoilers, I will be discussing some plot details. So, everyone wants to go in blind, then this maybe not be the best video for you. But if you have seen Firefly, I just want to go over it, discuss it, and maybe share my opinions, and you want to do the same thing with me as well. So essentially, Firefly again was written by Josh Whedon. Has a great cast of a lot of actors that most people will be familiar with. The most popular being, of course, Malcolm Reynolds, who is portrayed by Nathan Fillion, Zoe, who's portrayed by Gina Torres, Wash, who's portrayed by Alan Tudyk. I'm probably not pronouncing his last name correctly, but off the top of my head, those are the major actors that comes from this series. And as a huge video game fan myself, I also know Nathan Fillion and Gina Torres from Destiny as well. Nathan Fillion portrays Kate Six up into spoilers, Kate Six's death at the hands of Odrin. And of course, Gina Torres is, well, she used to portray Akora, the Warlock Vanguard, but I think she's been recast now, unfortunately, due to her busy schedule. So they have a voice actress that sounds like her instead. But anywho, and a really quick tangent, but let me, since I have it right here, the actress who portrays, of course, she's not, Morena Baccarin, or Nora's character. She also portrays Segura from Destiny. So just a quick tangent about that. Anywho, but if one has ever seen this show, then the characters need no introduction because all the characters on the on Serenity, the ship itself, Wash, Mal, Zoe, the Doctor, the younger sister. Oh gosh, River. Pardon me. Most people, I think, would agree that one of the best benefits about the show is the cast of characters that makes it feel more like a family than just individual characters. This show really does remind me of things like Deadwood, The Expanse, and other series where the setting really takes a huge forefront in addition to the characters. I'm not going to say that Deadwood, the TV series, the town itself is a character, but the way that it's portrayed, there's world building that surrounds it that makes one feel like, oh, I could live in the town of Deadwood. The characters living and residing within it, they're all quote unquote real individuals. And it feels really much the same way with Firefly. When I started rewatching it, this is about my third time rewatching it. The last time I saw it was about 5 years ago. And before that, about 8 years ago. I did first discover the show through the movie Serenity, and I was not aware that it was based on a TV show until after I watched the movie. I was shocked when I discovered that. I was like, oh wow, well, I definitely need to check out the TV show because if I enjoy the movie, then obviously it stands to reason I'm going to enjoy the show as well. And lo and behold, I did. And actually, it's actually because of Star Wars that I ended up rewatching Firefly. I specifically wanted to rewatch Serenity. In case you guys didn't know, Josh Whedon is a Star Wars fan, and he wanted to do his own kind of Star Wars action spaces. His own Star Wars space battle within one of his own properties. And so that's why when Mao goes in with this ship at the so spoilers for Serenity, but at the end of the climax when Mao leads in the Reavers towards Miranda to fight off against the Alliance. The reason why the camera's really zooming out, zooming in, zooming out, and really shaky, almost like a documentary like style. That's because that was based off Attack of the Clones episode 2. Anyways, but I really wanted to rewatch Serenity, but doing that is like eating your dessert and skipping breakfast. Although it's gonna taste good now, it kind of ruins the whole meal in general. It's much more better to have the savory dinner first and then have the tasty, sweet, usually sweet dessert after. And that's why I decided to watch Firefly first because I wanted to get that build up of the characters of the world before I watched Serenity. And we'll discuss more about Serenity in its own in its own brief review video. Now I'm just pausing a little because I think I just realized I began this video saying I'm thinking about, but if I did, it's fine. I'm doing my best just to be more natural. I really don't want to make my videos where it's quote unquote segmentized as in I'm thinking about, oh, I want to discuss, I want to converse, I just want to be more natural. Anyways, that was a quick tangent. But yeah, so I wanted to watch the show, and for me, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like, oh wow, I can't wait to rewatch this because I'm going to be reintroduced to these again. I know I keep saying this, but these great cast of characters that I don't mind spending my time with. I know that sounds really nerdy, but that's how Firefly makes one feel. And Yeah, so the characters individually, the ones I do want to discuss, the main character, Captain Mao, what makes him so unique is the fact that um, is he a good individual? Is he a bad individual? He's obviously a person who's much more morally gray, and he has his own ideals, and these ideals, that's what makes the choices and actions that he conducts. And as the viewer, we meant to ask ourselves, we're meant to question: is Mao, Captain Reynolds, is he a good person, or is he a selfish person? And I don't think that has an easy answer. I think he's a person who does think about himself, but also about his community. And so his crew is part of that community. So when it comes to his community, although he thinks about himself and his community first, he'll put his community above himself. But first and foremost, he is always thinking about himself in terms of safety, in terms of providing for his quote unquote crew or his family, and so forth. And then, of course, we have. Oh, excuse me, lapse of judgment. Let me see. Enora, I want to make sure without looking it up. Enora's character, who kind of serves as the quote unquote mother figure for the crew of Serenity. She's another individual who's very much like Captain Reynolds, except a little bit more. Not a little bit more rigid. I mean that in a good way. She's much more a good individual because she's not willing to do some of the actions that Mao does. But with that being said, she's kind of like the refining temperance that Mao needs. With that being said, as well, though, I want to make it clear that what's the cool thing about this show is that it's very quote unquote of this time. Despite being made in 2002, there's a lot of really great diversity and a lot of really great strong woman characters, Nora being one of them. And in fact, now that I'm discussing the right now, one of my complaints is just that I think it's a little bit too stuck in its time. I know I said a paradox. It's more like today's time, but it's also stuck in the past. So what I mean by that is I think if the show is written today, I don't think Enora and Mao, so I'm getting ahead of myself. Quick context. So Enora and Mao, they're obviously the romantic conflict within this story. I didn't go like this or say unison because very much the story, the love story, the romance between Enora and Mao, it's meant to make them butt heads because of their quote unquote conflicting worldviews. But again, they refine and temper one another. I think if the show was written today, I think it would have been much more beneficial to instead having them conflicting all the time, to instead just have them being together in a relationship already. I think if the series had been allowed to have a series finale, it probably would have ended with them finally getting together. Or maybe it would have been one of the season finales instead, but eventually they would have gotten together. I think the show would have been much more stronger if it started off with that basis already. But of course, if that had occurred, they'll have to change some plot details. So I did skip this aspect. Enora is a companion. That's essentially an escort in this universe, in this world that Joss Whedon has built. They're escorts, but despite that, they don't focus so much on the sex. They obviously do focus on intimacy, physical intimacy, and intimacy in terms of emotional closeness and also physical closeness, but they are also educated individuals, and I think that makes sense because how can you make a connection with someone you can't have a conversation with them, right? And this actually kind of goes back to Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of Women's Rights, something like that. That's essentially what she discusses. Men, you're not married to women, you're married to girls because they're not educated. They don't have an education, and thus they're not allowed to mature. Anyways, I'm going a bit of a tangent right there. But yeah, so the companions, they're educated individuals. I think that element will have to be changed. Before I continue, Captain Reynolds, he's just a pirate. He's an individual who's an independent fighter who was fighting against the government, the Alliance, who wanted to unify all the systems of the galaxy together to create one unified government. And I know at first it seems like it's a good thing, but I would argue, now that I've seen it 3 times, the show, the first time I saw it, I wasn't just a teenager. I was confused. I was like, wait, isn't the government supposed to be quote unquote the good guys, the ones who are supposed to help you? I don't want to sound quote unquote edgy and say that they're the bad guys, but I would argue that within the world of Firefly, they're much more closer to a dystopian, grim, dark future than a utopian, benevolent future. What I mean by that is if one has read anything from Warhammer, Warhammer 40K, or even from the world of Destiny, the way that the government is set up, it's more in line with that. So the Alliance is much more grim, dark than in line with reality. So Captain Reynolds is an independent fighter who lost, unfortunately, the independence of the Browncoats, and that's why he's a pirate. He doesn't want to go online. Basically, it's like a western set in a space setting. His Serenity is the horse. Pardon me. Serenity is the horse, and his crew is his posse, and they travel along on the fringes of the law, on the fringes of the Alliance system. But anywho, all that was context. I would think that Reynolds, if the story was to start with them together, I don't think they would need to change Captain Reynolds' past. But Anuro's past would need to be changed if they want to be together. I think it would have been more better to have made her a senator, or not even a senator, because that's going to be too close to Star Wars, right, with Anakin and Padme. But there's obviously some Star Wars similarities here. They could have made her instead a diplomat, for example, a diplomat whose job is to speak with different governments as a liaison from the Alliance, the capital itself. And by doing that, that would help explain why she's on this ship and she's traveling about. And she could have explained the reason why she's not in like any fancy cruise ship. It's because she wants to remain connected with the people that she wants to serve. And yeah, so I think that would have been much more better. It would have been that's the one element I do think is outdated about the show. It's just the fact that they're not together already. They're always conflicting, and it is a little bit tiring. But with that being said, they're still great characters. I love them. They do a great job of taking care of the rest of the crew and always keeping the crew in mind. Moving on, another character that I really do enjoy is the dynamic between River and the Doctor. You know what? Let me Dr. Tam, or Simon Tam, excuse me. The reason why I like the relationship between them, I remember when I first saw this show, I was a little bit confused just because I was more familiar with romantic love than familial love. And it was a little bit weird to have this man taking care of this woman. And the way that the show starts too, she has to be. So the context between them is that he's saving her from the Alliance because they're experimenting on her because she was gifted. She was a really intelligent young woman. And essentially, they gave her psychic powers, and she could read minds. And they probably would have evolved more into that if they had the opportunity. And so Dr. Simon Tam, he rescues River from that situation. And I remember when I first saw it, I just thought, oh well. Usually in this kind of situation, they're more romantic interest. It just really confused me. I think because I was too young to understand it. Now that I'm older, I love that dynamic. As I get older, the more properties that demonstrate love in a non-romantic kind of way, like for example Final Fantasy 15, the bros, the bros on the road with Doctus, Gladius, Prompto, and Ignis. And there's other examples I can't think of. Oh, Geralt and Dandelion. Things like that, Geralt and Regis in the books, I really appreciate that, and I think it's important to highlight that love is not just a romantic concept. It also is a concept that's involved in your family, your friends, and so forth, right? Anyways, but yeah, I really appreciate the dynamic, and it's really cool to see how they don't back away from the fact that Simon could have been a brilliant doctor working in a affluent hospital, living a high posh life. And the show doesn't really shy away from demonstrating that. But despite that, he always does his best for his sister because he's always aware of what he wants is not necessarily the correct thing that he should be following, right? It's just a really cool dynamic, and I do enjoy it. And with talking about relationships, though, we of course had to talk about Zoe and Wash's relationship. They're such a great TV couple. Definitely a kind of relationship that I think real couples should aspire to be. They obviously do trust and love one another sincerely. And I love how you wouldn't expect them to be together. Wash is this nerdy, outgoing individual, whilst part of my cat, I'm afraid she's gonna knock over my water. Whilst Zoe's a much more reserved, stoic individual. Yet despite that, they mesh really well. And then of course we have little Kylie. That's what Mal calls her sometimes. She's such a another perfect example of a strong woman character. And she's just small and petite, yet despite that, she's the mechanic of the ship. And she does give her input. She is a little bit outdated too in that she doesn't just communicate with the person that she's romantically attracted to, in this instance being the doctor. But with that being said, I would say that it is progressive in the idea that I would argue that the show does Kylie want to be with Dr. River, Dr. I don't know why I keep getting his name confused. With Simon, because of emotional attachment or just for physical attachment or a physical need, right? So basically, does she want to be with him just for sex or for a relationship? But yeah, and then of course we can't forget about well, there's two more characters. Shepherd Book, really intriguing character. When I rewatched it, even though I haven't really talked about him too right now, I think he must be my favorite character. He's very mysterious, very intriguing. I think personally, my theory is that he was obviously an individual who did some bad deeds in the past, and now he's trying to make up for what he did. And he understands that he can't ignore what he's done, but what he can do is just look to the future and not do what he was doing, right? Not repeat history, but do a new path. And I think that's why he ends up going on this quote unquote boat with the rest of the crew. And then of course Jane. So Jane's probably the character that I do enjoy his character, but as an individual, he's just straight up. If Captain Mao is selfish, but selfish in a positive way, that he uses it to protect himself and those that he loves, Jane is just selfish for himself and he's out for himself. And there's a couple episodes where I do wish that, well, there's one episode where he betrays River and Simon, but thankfully the show doesn't shy away from addressing that. And even in 2 to 3 other episodes, they make minor callbacks to that. But there is one specific episode, Janestown, where I don't know. I just feel like the ending of it, Jane should have recognized that there's a young individual who kills himself to protect Jane, but he didn't kill himself to protect Jane himself. He killed himself to protect the idea of Jane. I think it's important that Jane recognizes that, but I think the episode ends with him just thinking that he killed himself to protect Jane, the person, rather than Jane, the idea. But but yeah, well, I said that was the last character, but of course I'm forgetting about Serenity, the ship itself. My favorite episode is Bushwhack, where it goes over how all the crew met one another, and the episode just ends. Even right now talking about it, I get the chills. The episode ends with Mao, a salesperson talking to Mao, just saying, "Oh, this ship's gonna serve you really well. It's the best in its line. It has a lot of cool features." And one believes that they're talking about Serenity, but it turns out they're talking about a completely different ship. But Mao, he's not even looking at this. She's like, "Sir, are you listening to me?" And he's looking out to the side, and there it is, right? Serenity, a Firefly class ship. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm like kind of tearing up a little bit, so pardon me. It's just one of my favorite episodes. I think it does such a great job of emphasizing that sci-fi element of making the ship part of the cast, or not even just the sci-fi element, but making the setting part of the cast again, where it's not just a character itself. I think with sci-fi, it's easier to make the setting characterized, because you ride on it, you live within it, you communicate within it. But again, with something like Deadwood, the town of Deadwood from the show Deadwood, it feels also alive, but alive in a different kind of way. And I do wish I could think of other examples. I'm sure there's other examples. Oh, I suppose The Office, and The Office would be another example of that as well. The setting itself, the office space, although it doesn't feel alive in the same sense that Serenity and the Rosciante do, it feels alive in the same sense that Deadwood does as well. And let me see if we can come up with, I suppose also Hogwarts. And yes, I can't think of any other examples. Anyways, but yeah, moving on. This time I do actually have a set of outline bullet points I want to follow. So yeah, the story itself. The story, while it doesn't really have the main story is just keeping River and Simon away from the Alliance. And there is these cast of there's a set handful of episodes that focuses on that, and they're definitely, I would say, these are the main story. And part of that main story is focusing on Reavers as well, this mysterious group of people who are very barbaric, and they like to attack, rape, and cannibalize individuals. And the way that they create more Reavers is to essentially isolate people and terrorize them emotionally to the point where they too want to carry out violence and harm against other people. There's a group of villains, the men in blue hands, or the people in blue hands. I'm forgetting the specific term. I wish we had gotten more of them. They were really frightening. I couldn't only imagine what would have occurred if we had gotten in season 2. So before I continue, so I know I said at the beginning it's both a good and a bad thing that the season was just one season's worth. The series is one season's worth, and I say it's a bad thing because when you watch it, you realize, oh my gosh, there's so much more stories that this universe could have told with these cast of characters that I really love and enjoy. And I haven't even gotten into the minor characters who are in each episode, who either give the main cast their job, or who just interact with the cast as they complete their job. And there's a lot of characters who are great. For example, like I forgot his name, but Crawley's character from Supernatural, he's in here. And I don't like Saffron's first episode, but her second episode is pretty fun. And the episode with the young man who was part of the crew in the past, and of course the affluent individual from the episode where Mao gets into a duel. Anyways, but a lot of minor characters who are really great, and I wish we could have discovered more about as well. And it actually continues with the movie, the main villain. They're all just essentially fleshed out individuals, and you could tell that more stories could have been created in this universe. But with that being said, since again I've seen it 3 times already, I'm starting to see some of the cracks and some of the aspects that could have been refined. And who knows, maybe with the second season it would have been tempered, but maybe they would have continued with those making those same quote unquote mistakes, and those cracks would have gotten bigger to the point where it kind of would have ruined what we love and cherish today, right? I think the reason why we love it so much is because it wasn't allowed to harm itself. I kind of like that. What do you do? That quote, live long enough when you're the hero and you become the villain, whatever that quote is, right? It's something like applying that idea to this as well. So that's what I mean, that it's both a good and a bad thing that it was only 1 season. With that out of the way, though, I do wish we had gotten more seasons. I like to hope and think that Whedon would have done a good job of refining and tempering his ideas, and we do have evidence of that through shows like Buffy and Angel. I personally haven't seen Angel, but I've heard great things about it. I probably should watch that when I can. But yeah, and personally, I did enjoy Age of Ultron in his first Avengers movie, and I don't know what other properties that he's done. But yeah, so moving on, give me a second. Good thing I have my bullet points now. So so the movie was created as a way, I don't know the proper amount of years that went on after the show got canceled and the movie was premiered. But the movie was it was meant as a send off to the show, since they weren't able to do a second season. Josh Whedon created the movie, and again, that's definitely something that I will be making a video for that specifically, because it's also I personally think it's also a great movie. Again, it's what made me watch the show in the first place. And then lastly, so what would I recommend? Firefly. Would I recommend that one invests their time into watching? I believe it's 12 episodes. Let me quickly double check. Unfortunately, it's not stating. Oh, well, I'm already here, so screw it. Let me, 14. I had to count. There's no list, unfortunately. So excuse me about that slight pause. Thankfully, my cat was here to entertain everyone. Hopefully, she was entertaining. I'm not sure what she was doing. I was looking away. But there's 14 episodes. Should one invest their time in this series? And my answer is yes. From these 14 episodes, there's only 2 that I'm not a big fan of. One of them being an episode where it's towards the end, where a group of outcast escorts who were unfortunately cut up to become escorts. Oh, I'm sorry, companions. Excuse me. A group of outcast companions. One specific one who ended up creating her own companion-esque setting, essentially her own escort home. They need protection from an individual. It really has no connections to the main story. That's why I'm not a big fan of it. And the other one is with Saffron's first episode. Rather, the first half of her episode is just your stereotypical, I think, a negative portrayal. Negative stereotypical portrayal of women, and it's just I'm not the biggest fan because it's boring in my opinion. But once it shifts, so I don't mind doing spoilers. I just forgot about that. So let me be more specific. Once it gets revealed that she's actually tricking the crew and she wants to steal the ship and kill them, the episode becomes a lot more interesting. So from those 14, I would say there's 13 and a half. So only 1.5 they're duds, but even then they're fun to watch, and they do a great job of building up the characters. And going back to that, the outcast companion episode, that one I'm not a big fan of also as well, just because again, as much as I do love the storylines, my least favorite is the romantic story between Mao and Honora's character. And that episode is meant to, like, if the audience was not aware, like, hey, they like each other, possibly even love one another. In case you weren't aware about that, we just want to make that clear. It's like, okay, show, I get that. I've noticed that since the first episode. So it's not implicit in whatsoever. It's not explicit in an organic or natural kind of way. So would I recommend the series? Yes, I would. If you have seen Firefly, Let me know what you think about it. I definitely would love to discuss it and have a conversation. Have a great day, and hopefully, you're having a great day in this verse. Take care.